Okay. In the past week, we've done a few different tests, right? We did the Heller test. We did the part one of the Heller test. We did the Catano conjunctive test. And we did, after the Catano conjunctive test, both parts of the Miller test, right? So in the Miller test, it was in common use, and then it was military weapon that would provide for the efficiency of a well-regulated militia. So those are the two parts of the Miller test, and you only had to meet one of those two parts. So there's another test that I think, as this thing starts to play out, might end up, for us in New Jersey anyway, being the most important test. And so I don't know whether you would call it the McDonald test or the Thomas rule. Originally, I was thinking about the McDonald rule, and as I'm working on this thing over the last 72 hours, I really think that it's probably more prudent to call it the Thomas rule. And I'll tell you why. Thomas is involved in all of the cases, starting with the Heller case, at a very high level of input. And so the second case that comes around in 2010 is McDonald versus Chicago. And Chicago has got the same problem at the time that we in New Jersey had. And so just as a little background, New Jersey claimed that the Second Amendment didn't apply to New Jersey. When my case went to New Jersey Superior Court in 2008 in front of Judge Kreisman in Monmouth County Court, Judge Kreisman told me, and I mean, this is as direct quote as you can get off of my memory from going back that many years, but I think the exact quote is, "Our state constitution doesn't have a Second Amendment analog. New Jersey allows you to keep arms, but it doesn't allow you to bear them." And that was a very bizarre statement to me at the time, and that statement was one of the reasons that I actually got into doing this. So I'm going to go over the Thomas rule with you today, and I'm going to throw my glasses on here and I'm going to read it, because I think it's important that we get the wording exactly right, the way that McDonald wrote it, okay? So I'm going to read you Justice Thomas writing in 2010 in McDonald versus Chicago, and this is page 3044, okay? And I like page 3044 because page 3044 also has the case-by-case determinations thing in there. So I've always been partial to this, but this is one of those paragraphs that comes out of those cases that I think is going to be extremely helpful into pulling out where this whole Heller to McDonald to Catano to Bruen cases takes us as far as what the Second Amendment truly means and what we're allowed to do. And when I say that, I don't even want to say what we're allowed to not do, because there's only certain people that are not allowed to not do things, and that goes back to that Heller test we worked on. But let's get into this McDonald thing here right now, because this is wild, and I think it's overlooked, and we need to spend a little more time with it. Let me put my glasses on. Municipal respondents' remaining arguments are at war with our central holding in Heller, that the Second Amendment protects a personal right to keep and bear arms for lawful purposes, most notably for self-defense within the home. Municipal respondents, in effect, ask us to treat the right recognized in Heller as a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules than other Bill of Rights guarantees that we have held to be incorporated into the Due Process Clause. So, one of the takeaways there is, and bear arms for a lawful purpose, right? And that's in quotes. He wrote that in there, and bear arms for a lawful purpose. And I think that goes back to what we were just discussing in the Miller test and the Catano conjunctive test. As long as it's for a lawful purpose, there really is very, very few, if any, limitations on the right. Okay, so that Sheldon citation in Heller is probably explains everything you need to know about that. But let's get away from that, okay? And so there's something in there I think that we're going to focus on before we move into Bruen. So the Second Amendment right is not to be treated as a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than other Bill of Rights guarantees, okay? That's important because it's going to work out for us when we talk about carry in New Jersey and the Bruen response law and what the Bruen response law, what parts of the Bruen response law are actually legal, okay? Now let's move forward to Bruen. Now, this is also Thomas, okay? And he's gonna go back and cite himself in McDonald. So I'm gonna read this one for you too, because he changed the wording around a little bit, and it's super important that you understand the minutia of the wording as it applies to us, okay? So this is what he says. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than other Bill of Rights guarantees. He cites himself, McDonald at 3044. There's an ellipsis in there. It is not how the Second Amendment works when it comes to public carry for self-defense. That's 2156 in Bruen, all right? And so basically what they're saying is you can't apply a different set of rules to the Second Amendment because the government thinks guns are dangerous, right? And we've gone over that. Now, if you've been following me at all, you know what an advocate I am about the Shuttlesworth rule. And we haven't gotten to that one yet, and I'll get to that. But if you've been reading or listening to any of my stuff in other venues, Gun for Hire Radio or on New Jersey Firearms Owner Syndicate, you know I'm all about the Shuttlesworth rule. And I'm using the Shuttlesworth rule and its definite standards when it comes to these delays that New Jersey is giving applicants with the issuance of their permit, okay? And that's right on the money, but that comes from note number 9 in Bruen. And so it's like 2138 note 9, okay? And the sentence before the Shuttlesworth rule or Thomas's Shuttlesworth citation, which explains the definite standards, there's a sentence, and it's really, really important to know that it's in, there's so much information in Bruen. It's important that you run to note number 9 and you understand this sentence, because if you're in New Jersey and you're arguing the legality of any of the clauses in the Bruen response law, okay? And I'm going to put my glasses on and read that one for you too, because I think it's critical that you get Thomas's words, okay? So, note 9. To be clear, nothing in our analysis should be interpreted to suggest the unconstitutionality of the 43 states' shell-issue licensing regimes, under which a general desire for self-defense is sufficient to obtain a permit. He cites Hardiman's dissent in Drake v. Filco there. Going on. Because these licensing regimes do not require applicants to show an atypical need for armed self-defense, they do not necessarily prevent law-abiding, responsible citizens, and that's in quotes, law-abiding, responsible citizens from exercising their Second Amendment right to public carry. He cites Heller there. This is important. Rather, it appears that these shell issue regimes, which often require applicants to undergo a background check or pass a firearms safety course, are designed to ensure only that those bearing arms in the jurisdiction are in fact, quote, law-abiding responsible citizens, end quote. It cites Heller again there. That's critical, especially that last section. So, what I think the government is missing, New Jersey's definitely missing this, and I think when we discuss these things going into federal court, I think the federal judiciary misses this because they just don't understand what's going on in New Jersey. Every single applicant, every single New Jersey citizen that applies for a carry permit after 1978 has to have a 2C58-3B firearms purchaser's identification card. Okay? And then I'm gonna say 98.5 to 99% of the applications, every single applicant for a 2C58-4 permit has to show evidence of his ownership of the handgun, which is usually done in most of the cases with a copy of the 2C58-3A permit to purchase. I know in mine, I use my pink sheet. I know they don't have the pink sheets anymore, and now the papers are generated computer online, but I'm assuming, like I do, that if you guys bought your handgun with a permit to carry that came electronically, that you downloaded and saved that PDF and used that evidence of ownership of the handgun, right? And I think there was a couple other things the state police allowed. Now remember, this isn't even in the statute, and it's not even in the administrative code. This is just the state police's requirements in the instruction packet that they have on the state police website that all the municipalities are going by. So you're supplying evidence of a 2C58-3A permit to purchase, and you have to already have the 2C58-3B firearms purchaser's identification card. Now, let's take that back to note number 9. The concept of the 43 other states, which is how Bruen arrived at its decision on proper cause and justifiable need, came from what the 43 other states were doing. And what I think everyone's missing is that in New Jersey, we've already done that. And so if we have the firearms identification card, if we have the 2C58-3A permit to purchase, we've already been vetted. And I think, let me go back to the word, let me see the word that it says in note number 9, to ensure only that those bearing arms in this jurisdiction are in fact law-abiding responsible citizens. If you have the firearms identification card, if you bought your gun with the permit to purchase, you've already proven that you're a law-abiding responsible citizen, right? And so it's so important that everyone's missing that we have this law. Remember, firearms ID card and permit to purchase didn't begin in New Jersey until 1966. Before that, the permit to carry, the 2C58-4, started in 1924. And the designer of the bill said that the law was just to weed out the irresponsible and criminal classes. Like, that is actually written in the press. And so if the goal from the inception in 1924 was to weed out the irresponsible and criminal classes, right? And that's what the goal of the 1966 gun control law, which was everything, which was now carry, because they changed carry from concealed carry to all carry, and then purchase. So purchase of long guns, firearms owner's identification card, and purchase of handguns, 2C58-3A permit to purchase. All of those things now in 1966 become the law, but Sills 100 different times, and maybe more than that. So I probably have 75 newspaper articles that say this. I think the most important one is the A165 debates in March I think it's March 2nd. It could be March 3rd, March 2nd or 3rd of 1966. There's a big debate about the gun control law in Trenton. And Sills says, look, the purpose of the law is not to prevent you good quality citizens from owning or getting guns or carrying guns, which is very important. It's to separate the fit elements of society from the unfit elements of society. And Sills actually explained what the unfit elements of society were. And you know what they are if you've ever gotten the permit from New Jersey. They have all the disqualifiers of what would make you an unfit element of society. So we don't need to go into that. So what the government is missing up until this point is, if you've already got the FID card, you've already met the requirements in Bruen for a carry permit. And so in New Jersey, this whole second investigation, it was never designed like that in 66, never. The carry permit was designed to pick up guns that were not purchased in New Jersey. It was designed to pick up mail order handguns and guns that were purchased in Maryland and guns that were purchased mail order from a place in California. It's all documented. I have all the documentation. That is a fact. Okay? Now, let's go back into Bruen for a second. And why is this so important? Why is the Thomas rule so important? All right. And so let's go back and read the Thomas rule real quick, the way that he discussed it in Bruen. Okay. So he's citing his McDonald language from 2010, but he's reworded it slightly in Bruen. Okay. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than other Bill of Rights guarantees. Go back to my 2008 Superior Court case. New Jersey doesn't have a Second Amendment analog, and it allows me to keep arms but doesn't allow me to bear arms. Okay, so let's not think of the right as a First Amendment, a Second Amendment, a Third Amendment, a Fourth Amendment. Let's not look at it like that. Let's look at the right as the Second Amendment is not the Second Amendment right to keep arms and the Third Amendment right to bear arms. Let's look at it as you have the right to keep and bear arms, okay? What does that mean? Well, let's put McDonald, the Thomas rule from McDonald in 2010 with the Thomas rule in Bruen in 2022, and then let's put it together with note number 9. You can't treat the right to bear arms differently than you treat the right to keep arms. Okay? Now, take that a step further. If you've already been vetted for the right to keep arms, you've already been vetted for the right to bear arms. That just makes sense, right? So the government is saying, and I'm going to use New Jersey's language, right? We're going to separate the fit elements of society from the unfit elements of society. So you fill out all the FID paperwork, right? And you're not a felon, you've never had domestic violence, you're not addicted to drugs, you're not an alcoholic, and you've never advocated the overthrow of the government, so on and so forth. You guys know the list, right? And so if you pass that list of disqualifiers already, right, and that we know because we've already watched the Heller test, you're not disqualified from exercising your Second Amendment rights. That's from Heller at 2822. So what this note number 9 is doing for us is, if you've already have the FID card, you're already qualified to have the carry permit. And so I think what the government is missing is that today, now, post-Heller, post-Catano, post-Heller, post-McDonald, post-Catano, post-Bruen. Now, the 1924 carry permit law, which was designed to stop bootleggers and racketeers, and the FID card, which was designed to pick up all the people that weren't being picked up in the 1924 carry permit law. Now it's one law. It's the right to keep and bear arms. So there's one disqualification. You're either qualified with the FID card to exercise your Second Amendment rights or not. And so once you have the FID card, that is your permit to carry. Now, what note number 9 says is, and you got to kind of read, Kavanaugh's dissent. Kavanaugh explains it a little bit better. I know there's some people who don't like Kavanaugh's explanation, but his explanation is actually nice on this. Kavanaugh says you get a set of fingerprints, you get a background check, and you get the mental health consent form. Okay, but we've already got that. So the point is this: the Thomas rule. No one understands it yet, but the government in New Jersey for 2C58-4 applicants has already vetted you. And so what I'm saying on that is, under this rule, you actually already have your carry permit. And I think the way this thing's going to shake out in the next 3 years, maybe 2, but it could go as so far as 5. It depends, it depends how belligerent New Jersey is going to be. The FID card is your carry permit. Now, it could be the other way around. The state could want to get rid of the FID card and have the carry permit. Under Bruen, note number 9, that's allowable. They can have 1. They can't have 3, all right? They're not going to be allowed to have a background and a set of fingerprints on the FID card and a mental health consent form, and then have another SBI 212A check, which is your fingerprint check, and that investigation on your permit to purchase, and then have another set of fingerprints, a background check, and another mental health consent form on your permit to carry. Well, let's get rid of the references altogether. They're out. They've been out since 1933. I don't think I need to get into that. You guys have all heard me talk about the Fred Fort bill and the Waxy Gordon fiasco. Let's shorten this up a little bit. The point is this: the Thomas rule set forth in McDonald and carried forth in Bruen links back to note number 9 in Bruen, okay? It's not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules. It's one right, the right to keep and bear. Once that you've qualified for the right to keep, you've automatically qualified for the right to bear. Once you've proven you're not disqualified from the exercise of your Second Amendment rights, you're qualified to bear, to carry, okay? For a lawful purpose. All those things start to play in. But what they're showing is that for those of us who are the fit elements of society, for those of us who are doing this for the core lawful purpose of self-defense, there really are no limitations other than that. Okay, so the government likes to say, well, the Second Amendment is not unlimited. That's true. It is. I don't disagree. But when it comes to the core lawful purpose of self-defense, that's not my term, that's Heller's. When it comes to the core lawful purpose of self-defense, it is not limited. That being said, the government can't make you keep getting fingerprints and keep getting background checks and keep paying fees for SBI 212A forms and keep running mental health consent forms. And every time you turn around every year, you got to reapply for these permits. That's not the way this thing works. Once they give you that SBI number, you're qualified. And so whether that SBI number is on your carry permit or that SBI number is on your firearms identification card, it doesn't matter. You're now qualified. And I don't even think they're allowed to make you re-permit every 2 years. I don't think so. I think this is like the old FID card. I think this is for life. And that if you're arrested for something, let's say it's domestic violence or drug addiction, whatever it is, if you're arrested for that, then when they type in your SBI number, then they can pull your permit or your license, but they can't just keep you make every 2 years getting these, right? We're having a lot of guys that are having problems. They're getting their permits, and their permits were dated like 2 months before they're getting them. So they're not even getting their permits for 24 months. They're getting them for 22 months. And then if these problems are going along, the way they're going now, you're gonna need 3 months before your permit expires to get a new permit, just so you don't have over or underlapping of time, so you don't have 3 months between your permit expiring and getting your new permit. Anyway, that's another show in and of itself. The Thomas rule, or the McDonald rule, whatever you want to. I think we're going to go with the Thomas rule. The Thomas rule says once you have the SBI number, that's it. You're done. You've already qualified under the Second Amendment, under the Heller test, okay? And so you got to read it with note number 9, what it says, but the government's allowed to have that set of fingerprints and that background check, but once they have it, once you have that SBI number, that's it. That is your permit to keep arms and to bear arms. All right, I hope that helped clear it up a little bit, right? As every time we do one of these things, there's a new piece of the puzzle that comes up that we can start to explain to people, okay. The right's not unlimited, but the right is not limited to the point of for the court of lawful purpose of self-defense. All right, J Factor, New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate. Listen, don't forget, CNJFO is your friend. CNJFO is filing case after case after case, funding these cases. They helped fund the Cheeseman case in the Supreme Court. They were the only people who wrote an amicus brief at that time for the other case. They are big players in the Second Amendment community in New Jersey, and you should be a member of CNJFO. And if you don't want to be a member, you should at least donate some money to them if you like these court cases that are moving forward. Again, J Factor, thank you very much.